to 7. He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them.
Keith here from Islands at War. I'm here with Nick, and earlier this year we were contacted by Mr. John Ogier, resident in Australia.
Indeed.
He said he was coming to the island and he would be with his father, Frank, and could we meet up? And it was a very tight schedule, but it was wonderful to welcome John and Frank to Fort Grey, little fort museum, shipwreck museum that I'm an attendant at. And as a result of that, it was wonderful to talk to them, wonderful to meet them, obviously. And Nick, I'll hand over to you to explain. You recorded Frank.
Yeah, I did indeed. So they got in touch when they got back home with the offer of Frank would be more than willing to talk about his experiences as an evacuee in the UK. I jumped at the chance. I had a lovely chat with him. So we obviously had to record it over Zoom, so the sound quality is not absolutely brilliant, but it's certainly well worth a listen. And initially I thought, how are we going to do this? But as soon as I mentioned Zoom to Frank on an email, he was like, "Oh yeah, I use it all the time."
Yeah,
so that was absolutely brilliant. So he talked to me about various aspects, including the experience of being up north and getting bombed, and then down in Portsmouth and getting bombed, and then in Brighton and getting, let me check my notes, bombed. Various other things, the things that he got up to with his schoolmates, and the impact on his family. He talked about his family back here in Guernsey because his father was actually left back here in Guernsey, hadn't evacuated. So he talks about what happened with him as well. So some great aspects of, we're covering stuff happening on the island and in the UK.
And one appreciates that Frank is knocking on, and wonderful for his age, absolutely fantastic. And it's very, very important that we capture these memories. And Frank is, I think, a bit of an Australian accent, but he's resident in the UK now.
Yeah, and he's a really, really fascinating chap to chat to. He was. Yeah, is it all right if I tell this bit? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Just to tell us as much as you want. So I hope you will enjoy listening to my chat with Frank, which is coming up now. Do you want to start talking about your time, the sort of the run-up to evacuation?
Yes, if you like. when the war started, I was 7 years old, but when the occupation of Guernsey was there, I was just 8. I went to the Vale Primary School. And, of course, the schools were evacuated, although our parents did have a choice. I remember there was a family meeting when they decided that my father would stay in Guernsey and my mother came with the school, with my sister and I, as a helper for the teachers.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so that was the arrangement. So we left on, I think it was the 21st of June, on an old paddle boat.
I would say, 21st of June would be right. Yes, that would be right for the
date.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't remember the name of the boat, but I think it was an old cattle boat, and we were in the hold of this ship on the way over. It wasn't a very pleasant journey. And when we went to Weymouth, from Weymouth we went on a train to Wigan, and when we finally, can I tell you a story about a train ride?
Absolutely.
It doesn't relate to me. This was related by my maths teacher. It was called the intermediate in those days, but it's the grammar school now.
Yes,
His name was Alec Rose. And he told us boys at the school one day that when they were on the train going north from Weymouth, he wanted to know where they were going, and he pestered the guard on the train, but the guard just wouldn't divulge any information. So eventually, after a lot of badgering, the guard said, "All right, I'll tell you." So Alex said, "Well, where are we going?" He said, "You're going to Oldham, and God help you."
Where an awful lot of people ended up.
They did, yes, indeed. Yeah, we went to Wigan and we were in a school, a church hall, I think it was. And we were sleeping on camp beds until we got billeted out. We must have been there about a week, I think. Then we were billeted out to a couple. This was my mother, my sister, and myself. And their names were Doris and Austin Ratcliffe. Lovely couple. They didn't have any children, but they had a dog, an Alsatian. And I remember one morning in their house, Doris and Austin had gone to work, and we were left in our room. My mother opened the door, and there was this dog growling at us. So she shut the door, and we stayed there for the rest of the day till they came home from work. Never went out, frightened of the dog. But they were a lovely couple. And after the war, my parents invited them over to Guernsey, and they came over for a fortnight. Austin was an inveterate smoker. He brought 400 cigarettes with him. He was absolutely shattered when he found out they were about half price in Guernsey. Yeah. But they were very nice. And in fact, he died, I don't know when it was, but not long after the war. And his wife, Doris, went to live with her sister in Australia. And as you probably know, I have a son, John, in Australia.
Yeah.
And on a visit to him, I found out where Doris lived, which was not too far from where he lived, a place called Parramatta, which is really one of the suburbs of Sydney, I think. And I went and saw her and took her and her sister out for lunch one day. Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other side of the world, and you're able to go and meet up with them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, to carry on from where I left on in Wigan, the school in their wisdom decided to move to Cheshire somewhere, but any helpers that had come with the teachers were not included in the party.
Okay.
So my mother didn't like that idea much. So she'd come from quite a large family. She was one of 9, and she had 3 sisters in England, 1 in Portsmouth, 2 in Brighton. So she got hold of my sister in Portsmouth, and the upshot of it was that the 3 of us went from Wigan down to Portsmouth to live with my uncle and aunt there.
So you must have gone through some of the bombing raids on Portsmouth.
It was like going from the frying pan into the fire.
Yes, yeah.
Because it was pretty horrendous. I got bombed out of 3 schools. Fortunately, the bombs all landed at night time. When we got to the school, there was no school there. 3 times that happened in the space of about 6 months, because the Germans were after the dockyard, of course.
Yes, yeah.
And my mother, she had got quite a good job in the dockyard. And after about 6 months, the bombing got so bad, she thought, I can't leave the children here. So she got hold of her sisters in Brighton. The 2 sisters lived together. And my sister and I went to Brighton. My mother stayed in Portsmouth because of her job. She was in charge of 200 women in the dockyard who were dealing with the supplies for the ships.
Okay.
So she decided to stay in Portsmouth.
That sounds like a really responsible job, being in charge of over 200 women, especially when you got to think that there's no IT or, other fancy technology to help you with carrying out such a role.
Nothing like that. Yeah, so I spent 4 years of the war in Brighton. And really, in a strange sort of way, I quite enjoyed the war.
It's funny you should say that. I've spoken to a number of evacuees, and generally speaking, the boys said it was a bit of an adventure, whereas the girls took things a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. Yes, it was quite a big adventure. I mean, there was quite a bit of bombing in Brighton.
Imagine, yeah.
Yeah. But, and in fact, I went to primary school there till I was 11. Then I went to a grammar school called Varndine, which had massive playing fields. I don't know, they must have had about 4 football pitches, besides cricket squares and a hockey pitch. And I remember going to school one morning, and there was a typhoon which had crashed on the playing fields. I don't know the details of whether the pilot parachuted out or whether he got killed or what. But yeah, it turfed up one of our playing fields, one of our football pitches, that's for sure.
I'm sure there was a lot of interest in the wrecked aircraft. Possibly some of the bits might have gone missing. I know I've read accounts of others who used to race each other to try and get bits of downed aircraft when they were in the UK as evacuees.
Yeah. I can relate a story what happened to my father in Guernsey that he told us about.
Yes, I was intrigued by this one because John mentioned it in the email, so please go ahead.
Yeah. He lived in the Vale, or we lived in the Vale. And so I went to the Vale Primary School. And my mother's sister and her husband lived on the bridge. He worked for Leal's, which was next door to where they actually lived. I think Leal's actually owned the house, and they rented it from Leal's. And he used to have to lock up and all that sort of thing every night. But my father was on his way to visit them, and on the way you go through a road. It's called the Tet Lanes.
Yes, yeah, I know it.
Yeah. Well, he heard some commotion going on in a greenhouse as he walked through the lanes, and sure enough, he went to investigate, and there was the guy who owned the greenhouse having a fight with a German soldier. So my dad went in and helped this guy, and eventually they overpowered him. This was late in the war, so he was probably after food. Everybody was hungry at that time. And they overpowered him, and eventually he got carted away. Don't know what happened to him, but that was quite a nasty episode for him.
Yes, I looked through the archives the other day, actually, and things were getting really bad with the Germans and slave workers trying to steal food. When I got to April 1945, in fact, there was reference to basically they would, if it was night time and they saw somebody bending down near a field or a greenhouse, then they'd open fire without any warning.
Yeah.
It's a frightening state of affairs to be involved in, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think they were desperate times, weren't they?
Yes, very much so. I mean, absolutely awful for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, presumably your dad survived the occupation.
Yes, he did. Yeah. He stayed behind really to look after the property because he was a tomato grower and he had about 400 feet of glass to look after. And the reason why he stayed was to look after the property, really.
Yeah, I think there were quite a few people that chose to do that.
Yeah.
Just the uncertainty. I mean, it all happened so quickly in terms of the Germans, being imminently arriving in the Channel Islands. People had to make some fairly hard decisions as to whether they were going to go.
Yes, they did.
But often it was staying to look after elderly relatives who couldn't move to the UK, or like you say, staying because they were wondering what was going to happen to their property.
Yeah. It was the uncertainty, wasn't it?
Yeah, and of course you didn't have all the communications
Yeah, right.
that you have today, and there's so many rumors flying around as to what was going to happen, what might not happen.
That's right.
So very difficult time for everybody. Did he stay growing throughout the occupation, or did he do other things? Do you know?
No, he just stayed growing. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, he grew beet. And when we got back after the war, we got back in September, and we arrived back in Guernsey on my grandmother's birthday, as it happened, which is a nice surprise, nice birthday present for her. But they lived in a cottage. My parents lived in a cottage, and the walls are quite thick, 3 feet thick between rooms.
Yeah, my mum lives in just such a cottage.
Yeah, real old Guernsey cottage, Guernsey granite. Yeah. And there was a cupboard in the wall between the dining room and the front room. And when we opened it, it was full of jars of black treacle, which my father had made. He had a copper,
Yeah, yeah.
pour water in, for baths in those days. And he'd made this black treacle from the beet that he grew. But, I mean, him having suffered hunger during the end of the war, he insisted that every jar was emptied. It took probably years.
You were sick of it.
But for every day for tea, we would have bread and black treacle. But that was life in those days.
Absolutely. You had to eat what you were given.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you must have been sick of the sight of it, but
Yeah.
by the time you got down to the last few jars, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
I mean, I'd imagine you were very excited when you finally got to come back.
To get back to Guernsey?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yes, yeah. It was an exciting time, but when we got back, my father was at the White Rock to meet us with my mother's sister and her husband, but they were thin. They were quite thin then. Yeah. And we used to rely on Red Cross parcels as well once we got back. I mean, that was quite exciting for us kids. It was like Christmas.
Yeah,
I go and get the Red Cross parcel, open it up and see what was inside.
Yeah.
Like opening a present.
Yeah, I remember a lady telling me some years ago that when she got her first Red Cross parcel, she didn't really know what some of the things in it were, but she just ate just weird combinations of things, and it actually made her quite ill because she'd never been able to eat. So she learned her lesson. We gathered from the conversation that one of the parents weren't particularly sympathetic. Maybe something else. Suddenly blown you right.
I expect you have heard quite a few stories about that then.
Yes, yeah.
Since you've been doing this podcast.
Yeah, I spoke to a lady a couple of weeks ago, Olive Hamill, and she was evacuated as well, and her both her parents ended up staying here. And I interviewed a lady last year, Melva Stacey, who was also at the Vale School actually. But she didn't get evacuated because there was a problem with the boat that she was supposed to go on, and in the end, she didn't end up going. So she ended up staying here and becoming a nurse in the end, or working at the country hospital, what we refer to as the Cattell Hospital.
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's great to record these. So it's brilliant to talk to you. Have you got any other stories that you'd like to tell us?
What about my time in England?
Yeah, absolutely anything to do with that.
Well, I remember when I went back to Guernsey, one of the first things my father did was take us down the lane to a garage, and he bought my sister and I a bicycle each, so that we could cycle to school. That's our first bikes.
It must have been quite exciting.
That was really exciting. Yeah, got a bike of my own. We both learned to ride a bike before the war. Actually, there was a girl she lived 2 doors down. She had a bike, and my sister and I both learned to ride on her bike. And then the war came, and the only time I cycled after that during the war was when I borrowed my cousin's bike in Brighton, and I used to cycle around Brighton on his bike. He had one of these drop handlebar bikes. And a fixed wheel, because he was quite a serious cyclist. And I borrowed it. He was in the RAF, and I used to cycle around Brighton in it. So I did have some cycling experience before I got back to Guernsey. Yeah, but I needed a bike to get to school. Well, both my sister and I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to forget that, people weren't just back to driving around in cars.
In fact, my father never had a car. I tried when I was in my late teenage years. I tried to persuade him to, he ought to buy a car and get around a bit. He said, if I bought a car, you'd be the one that would be using it all the time.
I sort of similar one. Yeah.
That was probably right.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be the case for many.
Yeah,
And I think that's partly as well why it's, post-war, so many people were into riding motorcycles.
Yeah.
It's probably connected to that sort of thing as well.
Yeah. And of course, during the war, you weren't allowed to, in Guernsey, you weren't allowed to ride two abreast on a bicycle. It'd be single file, didn't it?
Yeah.
And one of my father's brothers, Cliff, he was found riding two abreast, and he got prosecuted, and he was put on the list to go to jail for riding two abreast. But the war came, and he never got to jail. The war ended, rather.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I think we've got this common sense that gets reported of tipping going through a whole load of Guernsey plastics from 1940 and 1953, and that is one of the more frequent breaches, that and being out of the curfew. But there was something like, I think it was, there was a chap did some research, and it came. He said his list wasn't complete, but he had a list with 1,897 prison sentences that had been dished out. Which, when you think there were only about 20,000 people left in the island,
Yeah, that's quite a lot. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. But yes, well, this has been brilliant, Frank. Thank you so much for getting in touch. And
that's my pleasure, Nick. Yeah,
and for
give my
joining us.
Give my regards to Keith when you see him.
I will do.
Because John and I met Keith at Fort Grey.
Oh yes, yeah.
We were over in June. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be recording with him tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So I will pass on your regards.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
It's been great to talk to you, Nick. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
I bet you were pleased to get that done.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. It was. We could have probably chatted for a lot longer, but we were a little bit constrained by time. So it may well be possible we might get Frank back again. But if anybody who is listening to the podcast has got a relative who lived through the occupation or was evacuated, or if you've got any stories from your family that you want to talk to us about, please do get in touch. If you're in Guernsey, we can come and visit you and record, or you can come here to the studio, whichever. If you're not in the Channel Island, not in Guernsey, then we can record you remotely. We've got a new bit of kit which I've been playing with, which will allow us to record you remotely. And all you have to do is click on a link, and then we can see each other on the video and record the podcast. So, yeah, be great to hear from anybody. So, Keith, you'll tell us the email address.
Yeah, occupied@gnetradio.com. And that's exactly how John contacted us, wasn't it?
Indeed. Thanks very much.
Yep, goodbye.
He looked to the heavens when he heard the engines hum. A sky full of planes and each one with a bomb. And they're gonna wanna drop them on someone. It's 5 to 7. All his friends and family had gone. Left on a ship 'cause they knew